my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing the Eclectic Reader Tag, tagged by Jennifer Loves Books, originated by Cozy Reader Kelly. Sorry it took me so long to get to this. This should be coming out fairly soon, I hope, Jennifer. I have remembered it is happening. I'm recording now, so you will see it soon. Where do you get your book recommendations lately? BookTube? Sometimes I will scan the Giller Prize potential book list. I think it's on their website. Essentially, it's just fiction that looks like it will be good, published in Canada, and generally I don't have a way of seeing otherwise. I've picked up on a lot of books that I wouldn't otherwise have. I think even one of my favorites of the year, Charlene Elsby's stuff, might have been from that list. But in general, BookTube now has become the main thing. How do you decide what to read next? It is completely emergent. It will be versus me walking up to my TBR, looking at the stuff, seeing how excited I am, what I'm in the mood for. I know my moods quite well. I tend to try to give the book the best shot that it can get from me, or it'll be an emergent property from the book that I was just reading. For instance, I was reading In the Land of Men before, a really good memoir about the first woman who was the editor for fiction in Esquire, who had a very close relationship with David Foster Wallace, who I wasn't even aware of at the time. And that springboarded me to Karen Green, the widow of David Foster Wallace, who published 2 books, Bow Down and Frail Sisters. Both of them are incredible, 5-star reviews. And once I consumed those, I then read a David Foster Wallace, The Pale King, which also phenomenal. And then from there I just continued to springboard off of. Typically I'll alternate gender and try to get in diverse representation for the authors as well. So it just depends, I guess. But generally, if I'm not having an emergent thing happening, then I'll just walk up to the TBR and select something. How have your reading taste changed over time? Commercial fiction and fantasy to reading practically everything. Literary fiction to definitely literary fiction in the last couple years has been a huge boost for me. I almost didn't ever really consume it except for classics. And I also have been reading romance lately because I knew that was an undervalued type genre for me, and I wanted to combat that notion. What genres, subgenres do you never or usually never read? Christian fiction, self-help, what else? Psychology, generally no. I will have already internalized most of what I know about that, though I have some in the TBR already. Definitely not something I go to for pleasure, though. It's like eating my greens or something. I don't read children's books typically, and generally I'm slowly phasing out YA as it becomes a little bit not my jam. What are 5 specific subgenres you enjoy? Include a recommendation or 2 for each one. Okay, so first, Unhinged Women. Yes, it's a genre, I made it up. Bunny, Mona Awad. Fantastic book if you like meta-contextual stuff bleeding in with surrealism. This is a book about a woman who is very much pressured, maybe suffers a psychological break of some kind. She is in an MFA program. The book ostensibly is a thesis, the final project of her MFA. And so there's a lot of meta stuff. It relates back to a lot of fiction. If you're a fiction nerd with a lot of classics and stuff like that, you should check it out. It also has a lot to say on group dynamics, in-groups, out-groups, general dark humor, stuff like that. It is just above contemporary prose for me. Also within the Unhinged, but I relegate it to the girls who hurt boys who hurt girls / good for her These books are great. Well, I should say the first trilogy is great. The second trilogy is not really great, but it's okay if you're super into the characters, I guess. This one in particular, I think most people will like. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, most people know of it. Most people have probably seen the movie. It's about a girl who is a state ward unjustly / Free Britney, and she has her finances controlled. She has no real agency. She's exceptional at hacking. She works around the system. In fact, it is definitely a modern cyberpunk book, as I would classify it. And she finds out that a newspaper man who is trying to solve a mystery hired by a rich corporate guy it has some intersections with some of her own stuff going on, and they form an unlikely partnership and solve crimes, but also she goes about solving her problems in a no fucks given kind of way. Next is Cyberpunk. Raphael Carter's The Fortunate Fall is a fantastic book. It is out of print, but easily got for cheap, because not a lot of people know about it, I guess. It is intensely good. Written by Raphael Carter, who I've identified as non-binary before it was even really a thing, basically, in the 90s. Refused to use any pronouns, and it reflects in the fiction. This is about a woman who and she has adapted her brain in order to what is called nowcast, I believe is what it's called in the book. Different cyberpunk books change it. But basically, she becomes the camera. People can feel what she feels, see what she sees. She can integrate parts of her own imagination into what is happening, what is being thoughtcasted or whatever, to the individuals that are experiencing it. So she's also an influencer before influencing. She's before Twitch. And she does journalistic stuff. So she gets a tip to go to a place in which she may or may not find the last living whale, which should not actually happen in this cyberpunk future. All the whales are said to have been destroyed. So what's happening here? And it spirals into this noir-esque type situation, but also is very interested in interrogating heteronormativity, the patriarchy. There's bits of flashbacks to her past when she was more like an activist, and she has whole sections of her memory gone because when you do something that is opposed to this state, they literally just wipe your memory. And it is an excellent cyberpunk book that most people don't know of. I wanted to quickly show you the opening of this book because it is so phenomenal, and I'd like to entice people to pick it up. So let me just try to read this a little bit. The whale, the traitor, the note she left me in the run-in with the post police, and how I felt about her and what she turned out to be. All this you know, I suppose I can't complain. I knew the risk when I became a camera. If you see something important enough, your thoughts become a coveted commodity. They steal your memories and sell them, tied in twine. Now you may find my life for sale in certain stalls, on dusty streets and twisting alleyway. It is available on Moistdisk, OptiCube, and DryROM. There are places on the net where you can make a copy free, although the colors may have faded to sepia and the passions a pastel. You have taken my memories and slotted them into your head, and you have played them through, reclining on a futon in some neon-streaked apartment, reliving my every sensation and thought from the hour underground with the whale. In that same vein, Red Spider White Web by Misha, the maybe only indigenous work within cyberpunk that I'm aware of. It for sure first wave cyberpunk as a 1999 book. This came out before Snow Crash even, I believe. And this is about a group of marginalized artists on the streets who create these cybernetic interactive pieces of art. There's a serial killer going around hunting for them, And meanwhile, a corporation is trying to pressure different artists to sign deals where they are taken care of for the low price of giving away all of their intellectual IP and future earnings, etc. And it is very analogous to Disney. It is very gritty. There's going to be content warnings for abuse, rape. You're in the actual mind of the killer when he's going through and killing marginalized people. It is definitely first wave cyberpunk, but is also directly criticizing aspects of cyberpunk that white artists and writers were not especially aware of. So it can be considered post-cyberpunk as well. Dark fantasy. Gormenghast. You need it in your life if you haven't read it. Mervyn Peake is... this is a masterpiece of fiction. The only thing that could stand with it is Lord of the Rings, and they're vastly different. This is quite gothic. It's about a very rich, I think, oligarchy-type family in a very dark fantasy way. So all of those themes that you think is associated with dark fantasy is here. And the unlikely protagonist is a cook who decides to sort of sow discontent and be more pro-direct action, I guess, in a way, against these people. The characterization is perfect. It is poetic, literally, and actually a masterpiece, like I say. I think everyone who's into fantasy should read this book. Is the Second Apocalypse, R. Scott Bakker. This is the fourth book, I believe, but it is got 7 books total. The first stand as a sort of standalone trilogy, and then these are a reaction to those events in a fast-forwarded kind of way, like it jumps, I don't know, maybe like 20, 30 years, something like that. This is exceptionally written. It is expressly about confronting the chosen one aspects of, or the trope of that in fantasy. It is very dark. It is confronting misogyny in a way that is so unnerving in some ways, and most contentious for people, because for some it works, some it didn't. Some people think it's playing into misogyny too much, and so isn't actually critiquing it. But if you read it to the end, it's very explicit, I feel, that it is against misogyny. It is heavily steeped in philosophy, and the magic system is absolutely incredible in this book. Next, let's go to Canadian crime fiction. The Unquiet Dead by Ausma Zehanat starts off the Rachel Getty and Isa Khattak series of 5 books, I think, maybe 6. Each of these books is the detectives heading a community policing effort, I believe is what it's called. It's experimental. He's the head of it as a Muslim man. They always have cases that are intersectional to international incidents that are quite well researched. At the back of the book, there's a sort of glossary type deal where she fact checks herself, basically. And she kind of weaves all of that stuff into a compelling narrative where the killer or the perpetrator or whatever situation instigates a more in-depth look at this international incident, how it relates to Canada. It is fairly critical of the hierarchy of the police, of police in general. The Canadian notion that we aren't racist is actively combated. They have a lot of stuff to deal with. Their partnership is also excellent. I don't like it generally when they become romantic. This is much more professional, wholesome type situation, and it's excellent being in the head of a Muslim man who generally is not portrayed in literature or in film and stuff like that as desirable as white men, and this actively goes against all of those stereotypes. This is more what I would say traditional Canadian crime fiction, but I quite like it. 40 words for Sorrow, Giles Blunt. This you might have seen on the show Cardinal, which is quite good, I thought. Each season adapts 2 books of these, and there's 3 or 4 seasons, so I think it's only 6 books though, something like that. And these books are about serial killings that happen in a small town north of Ottawa, I believe. It's in Algonquin Bay, I think. It's a fictional town, but shot in a real town that is in that location. And so obviously it has to end, otherwise people are like, why is there so many murders in this small town vibes, right? But these partners, again, in this is quite good. It's kind of like Nordic noir, where they have traumatic events that they're dealing with themselves, or just like not good at their normal lives as cops are wont to do. I found the cases to be pretty fun. Again, contemporary fiction, just above it probably in terms of writing, but it's a good solid base of which to work your way through the Canadian police procedural / crime stuff. Lastly, I'll recommend some epic fantasy. Oh, have you not read this? Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I think if you are of a certain age, generally after your teens, and you can handle, you know, a more literary bent on fantasy, and that's not a dig on teens, it just, I remember the sun-dappled trees as well as the rest of them when I was a teen, and I did not care, but now I do. So here's another push to read a classic, and another book that recently I've been talking about with people but doesn't get enough love, The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is part of the Dandelion Dynasty. Apparently, I heard on Kristinel's SFF channel that this is supposed to be a retelling of the founding of America, but I was not aware of that because I only read the first book. I have Wall of Storms next to read. It's quite bigger than this, though. I thought it was very fantastic when I read it 2 or 3 years ago. It is epic. It shifts perspectives all the time. There's a grand swath of time that is gone through, and it doesn't have any super strong weaknesses, I think, except for I think rightly people critique that there's not much women representation in this, but I have heard that the second book is excellent at addressing this. So I think that's it. I will see you next video. Bye. Oh, I lied. I need to tag people. I'll tag Michelle Lexi. I'll tag Courtney Ferreter. I'll tag Rosie Cockshut. Did she do the Eclectic Reader Tag? I don't think so. She's done a lot of tags though. I'll tag Guilty Feet, though I don't know if he does tags. Say Kevy as well.